All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Julia McCotter. I am a team member here at the Clackamas County Office of Economic Development. And today I will be guiding you through this informational session on the Clackamas County Business Development Grant Program. So today we're going to cover an overview of the program, some application tips, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. You are, however, welcome to submit questions in the Q&A box at any point during this presentation. If it makes sense to answer your question in context during the presentation, I'll do my best to do so. Otherwise, I'll address questions at the end. I do want to note that there may be some questions that I'm not able to answer today. If that's the case, I will follow up with you to make sure that your question gets answered. Some questions are just a little more complex, and so we need to kind of look into the rule book for them. So with that said, I would like to make just a couple of quick notes before we dive into the main content here. So I want to take a moment to note that I won't be able to cover every single element of this program today. This webinar is not a replacement for reading through the notice of funding opportunity. It's still every applicant's responsibility to make sure that you understand the program materials, and our program staff is here to help with clarification if you have questions around those materials as you're reading through them. So just make sure you understand everything before you submit your application. Once your application is submitted, there's not a whole lot we can do to kind of help bring you up to speed. So just ask a question sooner than later. Now, as I mentioned, during this session, you can submit questions through the Q&A box. You should be able to see it at the bottom of your Zoom screen. At any point during the session, you can do that. We will be updating the program frequently asked questions document after this session. And we continuously do that throughout the application period. So you can always kind of check back on that document throughout the period if you have a question and just see if it was already answered. We basically add any questions that we receive from the public that we think might be relevant to other applicants. So that document is constantly getting updated. Now, this session is being recorded today, and the recording will be made publicly available. So folks who are not able to attend this live session will still be able to get the information that we walk through. That also means please don't about your business in this session because it is being recorded. So if you have a question that relates to something that is more sensitive in nature, please just give us a call to chat through that. We just don't want to put anyone's businesses at risk. So I want to start today with the high-level purpose of this program. This grant program was approved by the Board of County Commissioners to promote economic development by investing in capital, capacity, or workforce development projects for traded sector businesses operating in or moving to Clackamas County. That's a really big mouthful, but each element of that is going to kind of play out as we talk through the specifics of program eligibility and what that looks like. This program is funded through lottery dollars, which by Oregon statute are allocated for economic development. So that is the core purpose of this program. That's always what the program is looking to achieve, is economic development as defined by the state. So it's good to keep that in mind as an applicant, just constantly kind of thinking back, what's the economic development case for my project? Now, in terms of program eligibility, I like to break this down into two buckets. There's kind of two sides. So one side is being an eligible business. And the other side is that the project that you propose also has to be eligible. So to be an eligible business, you must be 2 years old. That does not mean you need to have been registered in Clackamas County or even in the state of Oregon for 2 years. If your business has moved from out of state or from a different county or even internationally, that's fine. But this program does not fund businesses that are less than 2 years old. So if we're not able to verify the age of your business accurately using your Oregon Secretary of State ID, you will need to submit additional documentation to prove the age of your business. So keep that in mind if you have kind of a unique case there. You also must either be located in Clackamas County or moving traded sector operations to Clackamas County as part of this project. So we only fund businesses in the county. We'd love it when businesses move here. But all of these funds need to be spent for Clackamas County based business activities. You must have, as I mentioned, an active registration status with the Oregon Secretary of State. It's really important that you check this before you submit your application. If you aren't sure whether it's the case that your entity is registered and active with the Oregon Secretary of State, go to their website, go to the business lookup, look up the name of your business or put in your Secretary of State ID number, make sure your entity status is listed as active. You will not be able to receive funding through this program if your entity status is not listed as active there. Now, additionally, this program offers one-time funding. So if you've been funded by lottery dollars through Clackamas County before, then you are not eligible for funding in this cycle. You also must prove that you have sufficient available matching funds. So this grant program requires that your business spend at least as many dollars on your project as grant dollars are being received. So one-to-one match for every grant dollar you receive, you also need to spend an additional dollar of your business's money, whatever the source of that money is. So this grant, put another way, can only pay for 50% of your total project costs. Your business must meet the definition of a traded sector business. The definition for this program of a traded sector business is a business that is producing goods, making goods, manufacturing goods in Clackamas County and selling those goods outside of the county and its immediate surroundings. So that means that retailers, if they are not producing their own goods, wholesalers, restaurants, most other types of brick and mortar Main Street businesses do not tend to qualify, even if they're selling goods online or outside of the county. You have to be producing goods in the county. It's a really, really important part of the definition. Okay, now if you have an eligible business, you now need to make sure that you have an eligible project. So, and let me just really quickly say that software does count as a good. So you must have an eligible project even if your business is eligible. This program funds capital and workforce development projects, and we are looking to fund projects that are essentially expanding business, increasing revenues, increasing business activity in the county, hiring or upskilling staff, those types of projects. So your project also must be directly related to traded sector activities. You could be a perfect candidate from the business perspective for this program. You could be a long-standing manufacturing business located in the county that meets all of the other business criteria. If your project is to buy new desk chairs in the office for your accounting staff, that project is not going to get funded. It's not directly related to your manufacturing activities. So this is especially important for businesses who have some lines of business that are traded sector and some lines of business that are not traded sector. It's really important for you as an applicant to make it clear what the outcome of your project is and what lines of business are impacted by your project. The reviewers don't know that unless you tell them. So there are also maybe some businesses who operate in the traded sector, but maybe their industry is not always traded sector. And in that case, it's also just really important to make it clear that your business is manufacturing something here and is selling it somewhere else. So projects have to be related to your traded sector activities, and the same project in two different contexts could qualify or not qualify. So an example of that, a small ceramics studio, say, that wants to use grant funding to help purchase an additional kiln in order to increase their production of ceramics, right? If they are only selling their ceramic products out of their storefront, which is located in the county. They don't have an online presence. They're not selling anywhere else and have no other distribution channels. Then that project, even though it increases production, is not going to qualify. However, the exact same project, if that increase in production is going to go towards increasing their distribution up and down the West Coast, that does qualify. So make it very clear in your application what business activities your project is going to impact, because that can make the difference between qualifying and not qualifying. Now, other elements of project eligibility. These grant funds cannot go towards paying off debt or reimbursing previous payments. If you are applying to help fund a portion of a larger project that's already in motion, maybe kind of the A part of this project has been completed and paid for, and now you're looking to fund part B, it is fine to talk about the project as a whole in your narrative, but your budget needs to very clearly reflect only the eligible projects that you're actually applying for grant funding for. And it needs to be clear in your application the difference between a completed phase and a phase that's actually grant funded. So if you're in a complex situation like that, that doesn't necessarily mean off the gate that you don't qualify or your project doesn't qualify, but it just needs to be very clearly laid out in your application. And if you have questions about that, about how to lay it out in your application or about what types of documentation you might need to show, the project phase, you can always reach out to us and we're happy to kind of help explain what information needs to go into your application. Then, as I noted earlier, your project budget needs to reflect your one-to-one match of grant funds. So your project budget total can only be twice as much as the grant funding that you are applying for. If your project budget is $100,000, the maximum grant that you can apply for is $50,000. So your budget and your narrative, everything in your application kind of needs to be in agreement with each other. Otherwise, it's very difficult to score your application. All right, so I'm going to go over just a general overview of the timeline from applications openings through to when funding is dispersed near the end of the fiscal year next June. So after applications close, there is an evaluation period where your application is reviewed, evaluated for eligibility, scored. I'll get a little bit more into that process a little bit later when we talk about evaluations. After that period is done, the Board of County Commissioners makes a final decision about who receives funding and who will be placed on the alternates list, which I will also talk about. After that decision is made, county staff works directly with awarded grantees to go through the legal process of finalizing each grantee's funding agreement. So funding agreements are the legal contracts that grantees enter into with the county. This contract is the basis for how we ensure that budgets are appropriately spent, that the activities that grantees have promised to complete are actually completed, that there's a requirement in place for financial reporting and other outcome reporting. Now, businesses that receive grant funding are also required to submit reports on their outcomes for 2 years after the funding agreements are finalized. So that's not included in this nice timeline graphic, but that is the case. There are a minimum of 3 reports that have to be submitted by grantees with information about your employees, about your business activities related to the project, and about your budget, and receipts with your budget need to also be submitted. So there are other things that kind of happen after the conclusion of this main timeline that we're looking at for 2 years afterwards, essentially. Okay, so moving into the application process. Number one, it is really, really important that all applicants fully review the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, and the Frequently Asked Questions document, or FAQ document. It's up to you to make sure that you understand these materials before applying. Now, all of the application questions are located at the end of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. We use an online submission form to actually receive the applications. So that is where you will actually put in your application responses and your documentation. However, that platform does not allow you to save a draft. And if there's a submission error, it will not save your responses. So I cannot recommend strongly enough that you prepare your application in a separate document that you can save and have access to, and just copy and paste your responses into the actual application form. It is very devastating to lose hours of work because your browser refreshed, or there was an extra character in one response and there's a submission error. Now, you will also need to prepare your budget using the template provided. It needs to be submitted in that application platform in Excel format, regardless of what format you prepare it in. It needs to be converted back to Excel if you convert it to a different format. So not a PDF or any other type of document. You will also need to submit proof of your source and availability of matching funds for your project. For most applicants, this is going to be something along the lines of a copy of a bank statement or a screenshot of an online banking dashboard. For a lot of applicants, they're using existing business cash as their source of matching funds. With that said, please do not send us anything confidential that we don't need to see. So we don't need numbers. We don't need to see your social security number. We don't need your transaction log for every transaction of that month. We don't need check images in 99% of cases. So we just need to see that there's the appropriate amount of funds available. We need to see that funds are in the business or the business owner's name. Other match documentation could include a document showing an active line of credit or loan. It could sometimes include a letter from a business banker. So yes, I see another question about that. Yes, a letter from the bank can be sufficient for that documentation. It just needs to clearly clarify that there is the amount of money that you say there is and that it's available. Now, if you have a unique situation with how you're sourcing your matching funds and you're not positive what documentation you need, please just reach out to us. We can talk through it and figure something out for the review committee to have enough information to appropriately see that you have those matching funds. There are all kinds of ways that we can verify that. So if you're in a unique situation, just give us a call and ask about it. All right, so moving on to that evaluation process. Now, the first step of the evaluation process is an initial eligibility screening. So we screen every application for all of the eligibility criteria, and we verify it. We don't just take your word for it that you've been registered with the Secretary of State for X number of years. We check that. We check that your registration status is active, and that's just one example of one of those evaluation criteria. Now, only eligible applications, which I want to note, that's why it's in this slide, they're eligible applications and responsive applications. That's how it's written in the NOFO. That's the same thing. So I use those terms interchangeably, verbally in our official documentation in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Responsive is the term that's used. So eligible or responsive applications are moved forward for scoring and review by the full review committee. Staff uses various methods to review the claims made by applicants, so it matters just as much that the information you give us is true as that it is competitive. Now, eligible applications are scored by the review committee. The review committee then prepares funding recommendations and the alternates list for the Board of County Commissioners. These are just recommendations that are made by the committee. The Board of County Commissioners has final say in all funding decisions, including the alternates list. Now, the alternates list are high-scoring applications that didn't make it into the funding pool. This is a very competitive grant program. We receive many more requests for funding than we're able to fulfill, and many more eligible applications than we are able to fund. So the alternates list is a list of applications that just didn't make it into the funding pool. Now, that list is used in the event that an approved grantee is not able to move forward with their grant award. So this would typically happen in the funding agreement process. Sometimes there are changes to the business or to external economic conditions, or there's an issue with the legal paperwork that's required. There's all sorts of reasons that a business might be awarded a grant and not actually be able to move forward with it. Having an alternates list allows us to then use those funds in the same program cycle. Without an alternates list, those funds just have to go into the next year of the program, and we would prefer to fully fund each year of the program. So that is the function of the alternates list. Now, applications are scored for project fit. How good of a fit are they for this program? The need of business, how impactful is this going to be on each business? Economic impact. This is definitely the majority of the scoring points. This is the most important thing. This is an economic development program. And project viability. So we want to see realistic projects that we know can be completed in the timeline that our grantees set. We want to make sure that these projects are actually going to be able to be completed. As I said, the Board of County Commissioners has the sole and final authority to determine funding for this program. The review committee will submit recommendations for funding. They'll submit recommendations for the alternates list. It is up to the Board of County Commissioners how they want to fund this program. Okay, so some general tips and tricks for the application. Now, I've said this in a couple of different ways, but it is really important to demonstrate that you meet all of the requirements for this program. The review committee does not know what you don't tell them. So it's important to kind of put yourself into the shoes of the reviewer and think, am I providing the right amount of information? Is there something that might be difficult for someone to understand if they're not a subject matter expert in my industry or aren't familiar with my business? If you operate in an industry that's not always considered traded sector, if you have a project that could be affecting traded sector lines of business or could not be, it's really important to clearly show that you are meeting the criteria, that your business is operating in the traded sector, and that your project is impacting traded sector activities. It's also really important to ensure that your project is consistent across the application. So your narrative around what this project is going to do and what the expenses are going to be should match the expenses that are listed on your budget. Your budget should make sense in the context of your application. Your stated source of matching funds, what you write down as your source of matching funds, that should be really clearly demonstrated by your match documentation. If you say your source of matching funds is a loan and your match documentation doesn't show anything about the loan that you stated, then it's very difficult to evaluate whether you actually have the matching funds that you say you have. So just double check, be careful, make sure that everything is in agreement with each other, both your additional documentation and what's written throughout your application narratives. In your application narratives, it's really important to clearly draw the line between your project and your outcomes. So lay out what will happen as a result of this project, both the impact on your business and the impact on the economy. We want to know, are hires going to be made? Are you going to increase your staffing? It does not need to be a workforce development project for you to be able to say, we're going to also hire additional staff as part of this project or as a result of this project. We want to know that. What's the impact going to be on hiring, on business activities, on lines of business, and on any other economic activity, local supply chains, anything that might be relevant for the review committee to know. We don't know what you don't tell us. Then also remember that this is a competitive grant program. Meeting base eligibility is not a guarantee of funding. It's really up to you to make the case for your project and to reflect your project accurately, to reflect your business accurately. We do review and verify the claims that you make, so make sure that you can back them up. All right, so that concludes the slides portion of this presentation. We've received a few questions here that I'll get to. I'm responding to those. If other folks have additional questions you want answered, you can submit them in the chat or you can submit them through the Q&A box. So let's see, Thomas, I see your question. Will this program allow for digital marketing services from an agency? Digital marketing services from an agency could potentially be a portion of a project's expenses, if that's what you are asking. Again, it would need to be related to an increase in production or otherwise business expansion. So it depends. It's really the answer to your question. If that's not quite your question, if you want to clarify or ask a different way, you're welcome to submit an additional one. But there are instances where digital marketing services could be included as a budget. If that was the only line item, we couldn't see that being a super competitive application. Now, Nancy, I see your question. Production of just goods and not services. Yes, that is the case for the program this year. If services are part of goods, if like the question that we answered earlier, if software is tied into services, we can kind of get into a gray area there. So it does depend a little bit, but pure service-based businesses are not eligible in this cycle. Let's see. And then are grant requests ever partially funded? The answer is yes, often. So there is a question in the application that asks if you receive partial fundings, what expenses would you prioritize? Really think about that question when you're preparing your application, because it is likely that businesses will receive partial funding. So we ask that question because we want to know, what do you see as the primary core activities of your project? What would you prioritize if you were only given, half of your request or a quarter of your request? That can help the review committee make those funding decisions. They're always looking to get the highest economic impact for this pool of funding. All right. Now, I'm not seeing any other questions. I will wait for another minute in case someone is typing one. But if there are no other questions, I do want to encourage folks, if you are going through this process, if you're reading through the materials and you have questions, you are not sure what type of documentation you need to submit, there's something that's falling into a gray area, you're just not sure about anything, please reach out to us. We are here to be a resource to support any potential applicants to understand their eligibility for the program. And I'm seeing another question we're getting here. Okay, so the digital marketing services, and this is the follow-up to that digital marketing question. Digital marketing services would be in order to increase sales, especially out of area sales, and would result in increased demand. Such increase would necessitate an increase in production staffing. Yeah, I think, Thomas, we might want to discuss that a little bit further. It would definitely need to be very directly related to that increase in production. So if the digital marketing services are the primary activity of the project, and the expected outcome of an increase in production is because the digital marketing services lead to sales, then that would probably not qualify, but I want to talk through your specific case. I don't want to give you a hard yes or no on that without a little more context. So if Thomas, if you would like to reach out to talk about this further, my phone number is listed on this slide as well as our intake email. All right, and I'm seeing another question from Cindy. Let's see, what is the total amount of funds to be distributed? Great question. This year we have $650,000 that will be awarded, and maximum awards are $100,000. Okay, and another question. Has this grant been offered before? And if so, how much in dollars were applied for versus amount available? Yes, last year was our first year offering this program. There are a couple of tweaks to the program this year, but it is in essence the same. Last year, we had $600,000 in our pool of funding. We actually had an awarded grantee who was awarded $50,000 and then was not able to move forward with their grant project. That $50,000 was then applied to this year's program. So that's why we have 650 this year, and that's also why we have an alternates list this year. So last year, the actual amount of funds dispersed were 550,000. So just a little nuance there. I believe that our total funding request last year totaled $1.9 million. It was right in that area. So there was significantly more demand for the grant funds than grant funds available, more than 3 times the amount. All right. Any other questions? Okay. I am not seeing any. So if you think of a question later, please reach out to us. I hope this session was helpful to give you an overview of the program, help you understand the eligibility criteria and some of what's expected in the application process. We are here as a resource for you. Our staff is available to answer questions all the way through the application period until the day it is due. So really, please don't hesitate to reach out. We would always prefer to spend 5 minutes chatting with someone about their project, then have them spend 3 hours filling out the application and then end up not being eligible or not submitting the right documentation. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I hope this was helpful and thank you all for your attendance.